Hello and welcome to another Falcons Central radio show. I'm Aaron Freeman, joined by my good friend Scott Karasik. Today we are talking again about our favorite team, the Atlanta Falcons. This week we're going to do further of our positional analysis. We'll be talking about defensive linemen, sort of, I guess, what would be considered a defensive lineman in a 3-4, even though we're not a true 3-4. But Scott and I will talk a little bit more about that later on. But we'll also be talking a little bit about this T.J. Yates trade that happened last week. We kind of talked a little bit about getting T.J. Yates last week on last week's show, but now we can actually talk about having him. And we'll answer your mailbag questions at the end. But Scott, where do you want to start off?
I say let's go ahead and start off with the Yates-Dent trade analysis. I feel like that's as good a place as any.
All right. So what are your thoughts on the trade?
Well, I think it makes perfect sense because, let's put it this way, Akeem Dent wasn't, by my projection, making the roster. Because I figured he's the exact same thing as Yawin Smallwood with 3 years of experience added. And why have Yawin Smallwood plus 3 years experience if Yawin Smallwood can be better than that? So you can get rid of Dent. I think they were going to end up cutting Dent anyway. So a guy who you're going to cut for a guy that the Texans are going to cut, on the surface doesn't look like anything that makes sense. But the Falcons didn't have a good backup quarterback, period. We were talking about it on the show probably 6 or 7 times already. Like, hey, we need a backup quarterback. There needs to be somebody in case Matt Ryan goes down who fits Cotter's offense. And I think that's T.J. Yates. And I think they made the perfect decision in bringing him in. He's got better fits for the kind of – he's got better receivers for his throws. For his kind of throws right now. I do think that Dent could end up starting in Houston, which would make the trade look a little bit worse for Atlanta in the long run. But the only reason why I think that happens is because I think Brian Cushing gets hurt at some point. They move Brooks Reed over the weak inside linebacker, and then Dent starts on the strong side. That's the only reason why I think that happens. Other than that, I don't see it as anything more than, our backup for their backup, our deep position for their weak position or for their deep position in terms of backup quarterbacks. They had 4 of them. They just didn't have a starter.
Mm-hmm.
So you take one of their backups and then bring him over here, and I think he's the perfect backup for Matt Ryan.
Yeah, I think you pretty much broke it down. When we had Ben Albright on after the draft, we talked a lot about the Texas quarterback situation, so people can go back and look at that show. I think T.J. Yates is an upgrade over what the Falcons had. I had no faith in Dominique Davis, Jeff Matthews, or Sean Murphy being able to come in this year. Now, 2015, 2016, that's a different conversation. But 2014, if Matt Ryan's goes down for a game and we have to win a game, and we're probably not going to be like 13-3 this year. We'll probably need every win that we can get. And so one missed start by Matt Ryan could suddenly be the difference between, making the playoffs and not making the playoffs. So I think it was a very important area for the Falcons to address their roster. I think Yates is better. I don't think Yates is by any means like one of the best backup quarterbacks in the league. He's probably in the lower half of number 2s in the league if you were going to sit there and go down a list and say, who would I rather have? But he's still significantly better than what we had because Dominique Davis, as far as I'm concerned, was probably the worst. With Dent going to Houston, I think it's a good move for him because, as you say, he'll probably end up starting because Brian Cushing's probably going to get hurt. You look at all the injury-prone linebackers, Sean Lee, Sean Weatherspoon, and John Beeson, they've all gotten hurt this offseason. They're all pretty much, Beeson isn't out for the season, but he's probably going to miss the first month of the season. and Lee's out, Weatherspoon's out, and so we're all looking at Brian Cushing right now. I'm like, okay, when's that season-ending injury going to happen? Because it always seems to happen with those four guys. But yeah, I think it's a good move for both teams all around. I really like that the Falcons, seemed like they were ignoring the backup position and going with Jeff Matthews, bringing in, somebody that really isn't going to upgrade the spot this year, maybe a couple years down the road. But they get Yates, and he'll be an immediate, hopefully he won't be an immediate impact player because we'll never see him play. But, I think if the situation occurs where the Falcons have to play their number two, Yates is a lot better option than what we had.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
He's just 10 times better than anything out there right now, which, again, isn't really saying much, but it's something. All right, 3 roster spots are open on the current roster right now.
Yeah.
Falcons have, I guess you could say, they don't really have any needs at this point, except for maybe pull in a pass rusher, pull in maybe like a tight end. Those are the things that really stand out at this moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
So do you see them, I don't know, going after Jermichael Finley, trying to pull in, say, Jason Bateman, maybe add, I don't know, another safety so that, say, Zeke Mata has a neck injury and he can't get any reps during training camp? You put Mata back at or you have somebody who can at least take some reps?
Yeah, I think you're reading my mind, Scott. I'm thinking about that, and I know every Falcon fan wants us to go out and get any pass rusher because if you're looking at the roster, you can make the argument, and I probably would make that argument that the pass rush is the sketchiest part of the roster. I've heard a lot of people talk about going after Jason Bateman. If the Falcons could get Bateman on like a 1-year, $1 million deal, I'd probably take that over what OC's getting paid, which is I think he's in the last year of his contract. He's making like $4.75 million this year. So I think they're about the same player. They're both kind of over the hill, complementary pass rushers. If you could sign Bateman for on the cheap, I'd take that over OC. But you're not really upgrading the position if you are by a very marginal issue. But I'm looking at the roster and I'm looking at depth at safety, depth at tight end as 2 areas that you possibly can address because what you said, we don't know where Mata is. I think it would be, if I was going to, place a bet, I'd probably say, that backup strong safety position is one that you could definitely expect the Falcons to address, especially if Mata looks like he's going to be out for the season or even out for a part of the summer. It kind of seems like that's pretty much inevitable. It's just a matter of whether he comes back at some point during the regular season. But, tight end, Jermichael Finley, yeah, why not? He's the best tight end out there. Pretty much everybody else is kind of meh. I guess the question is, though, because the Falcons basically said we're getting rid of the F tight end, the so-called flex move tight end, out of the offense that Tony Gonzalez has done. That's basically what Finley does. So if they were to sign Finley, would they be like, oh, yeah, that thing we said earlier about getting rid of that position, we jumped the gun or we didn't know what we were talking about or we whatever, and so would they just basically, staple all those pages back into the playbook? I don't know. But, I think there's 3 roster spots. I don't think it means that the Falcons are going to go out tomorrow and make a move, but, they'll probably work out a couple of guys. They got, 3-4 weeks before training camp and probably on the eve of training camp, I'm reminded of, when was it, 2008, 2009, when they signed Grady Jackson back, like the day before camp opened. I could see a move like that for if some of these free agents are still available. What are your thoughts, Kyle?
I think if they do that, and it does end up being Jermichael Finley, I don't think they go, oh, well, we jumped the gun. I think they go, well, Jermichael's going to allow us to do the same kind of things we did with Tony Gonzalez. And I think he's going to be better at attacking the seam. And I think they're going to be like, he's an upgrade from Tony Gonzalez. because let's be honest here, he kind of is in the receiving game from old Tony because he's faster. Let's call a spade a spade. Tony last year was probably running a 5.0 in the 40.
I'll say he's more dynamic than Tony. I don't know if I would go full upgrade, just because Finley
His
can't.
hands aren't as good.
And Tony could catch everything pretty much. When Tony dropped the ball, you were like, "What just happened?" You know, Finley, that pretty much happens every game. So I wouldn't go full upgrade, but he's more dynamic. You can do more things with him.
Yeah, he's not going to catch every ball, but he can break that 60-yard catch if he wants to.
Yeah.
The other spot that I could see them bringing a guy in is offensive guard, just so they have a third string, so they can run 3 full strings of offensive linemen.
Okay.
Which, again, it doesn't sound like it's a lot, but when you've got 3 full strings of offensive linemen, it makes it easier to run plays. Maybe they bring in a tackle instead of a guard, but they bring in somebody. Could even be Will Svitek. He already knows the playbook. But just bring somebody in to compete.
Didn't Svitek just sign with like the Bengals or somebody like that?
I don't know if he did. I'm not really paying attention to Will Svitek. Put it that way.
All right. But, okay, I get what you're saying.
Just somebody, just another body at tackle. The other spot that I could see them bringing someone else in, and I know you don't like talking about it, is fullback.
Okay.
I could see them take LaRon McClain and put him at fullback. Like, go out, get him, put him at fullback, just say, he's our starter. Makes perfect sense to me. Move Roosevelt Nix back to linebacker and put him as a strong inside linebacker for competition.
Okay. I can go with that.
Good in camp at fullback, but he and DeMarco were about even.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if you were to sign McClain, a guy like McClain, or even then they work out Greg Jones earlier this offseason, some veteran like that, basically, that's pretty much they won the job. Another position I think, depending on where, because he's getting, I guess, injury update over this next month too. Corey Peters, you might bring in another wide body at nose tackle, maybe somebody that can, because basically this year I expect Peters to basically be the sub for Soliai in pass rush situations. So someone that could kind of play a little bit of the nose in their base package, play some defensive end. Like the ideal player would be someone like Kevin Vickerson, but obviously he's not available, but someone who's got experience and can play like all 3 line positions in the traditional 3-4 and then maybe some interior in the 4-3. I don't know if there's a player like that out there, but if there is, I think it would make a lot of sense for the Falcons, especially if Peters is on the PUP at the beginning of the training.
See, I don't know about that because I really think that if they wanted to have a backup nose tackle, you easily could have Rashid Hageman there.
It's true.
Because Hageman played primarily one technique when he was in college. It was just attack from the inside every single play.
Yeah.
I mean, Ryan Pickett, 34 years old out there, Adam Carricker, Johnny Jolly, Kenyon Coleman. There's really no one out there who you go, oh my God, this guy's someone we have to have on our roster.
True.
Like Sean Rogers, Isaac Sopoaga. None of these names are like, oh my God. Now, 3-4 years ago, bring them in.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, honestly, you might be better off with Prey Jerry.
Okay. That's slap in the face of all those guys you just named. But
maybe the only one that might be worth it is Abreu Franklin.
Okay.
And he should already know the scheme since he's basically played in Mike Nolan's schemes half his career.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's interesting. Do you expect the Falcons to go for 3 name players, or do you think they might just wind up 3 bodies, 3 camp bodies? And maybe one of them, because I think, what was it? Who was the wide receiver that we said? Tim Toon. Like, he was a body, and then he actually made the team for like a week or two. But
I mean, if they want to go out and get somebody who might have a shot at the team, just throwing some names out here, why not go and take a look at a guy like, I don't know, Blake Annan from Cincinnati? I don't know if he signed with the team or not, but just an example, some rookie guys who have a shot at teams.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to take a look and see who's available from my rookie list, but that's not a bad thought either. There might be a tackle out there that no one signed that might be a good body just to throw out there and get abused.
Yeah.
As bad as that sounds.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really about bolstering competition, and pretty much most, if not all, the Falcons' starting positions are pretty much kind of locked up. There's probably a couple here or there that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head that we'll see competition for, but it's pretty much like the back end of the roster is where the Falcons are going to have the bulk of their competition. So, it would make sense in that area where you just add guys that are really going to increase the competition at that part, not necessarily guys that are going to come in right away and be expected to fill major roles on their, 35, 40-man roster or whatever. Like the 35 guys that actually play offense and defense. Because that's the truth of how you build a roster. It's basically, you activate 46 guys each Sunday, and like 36 of them or whatever actually play offense and defense, and the other 10 just play special teams.
I mean, so. I don't disagree with that. It makes a lot of sense, bringing in just bodies to compete, but that's why I go with Jermichael Finley.
Mm-hmm.
If he loses out to Mickey Schuler, which it might be a real possibility if he doesn't come back from injury, right? Why not? Why not have him have a shot?
Yeah, I'd be for it. It could go either way. I just, the possibility is out there that, some people might be expecting us to go get some big name guys, and then we wind up signing 3 guys you've never heard of, and they'll be like, what is going on? And, they just try to dress the back end of the roster where it really counts, not necessarily the front end. So.
Yeah, I mean, that makes a ton of sense to do it that way. I never even thought about that. Just pull in straight competition for the end. I mean, it's not like you're really doing anything right now anyway. Mm-hmm. But it does end up being a great signing, and the guy can make the roster and show some sort of impact. I still feel like Tim Toon would have shown an impact had he not gotten hurt in the first freaking play of the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
First play of the season. Got hit by a... Anyway, yeah, let's go to defensive line analysis.
Let's do it.
So we're going to go with basically 43 defensive tackles and 34 offensive linemen, and kind of going over how these guys fit. At nose tackle, you got Paul Soliai, you got Travian Robertson, you got Dante Rumpf. Those guys all play with the 1 technique or the 0 technique in either scheme.
Mm-hmm.
At defensive tackle, defensive end, you got Babineau, Peters, and Jerry, all guys from last year. I would even say you've got Rashid Hageman. I think he can play anywhere from 1 to 5.
Fair.
1 to 6 in terms of technique. Then you've got Tyson Jackson, Malachi Goodman, Cliff Matthews, and Nosa Igwe. All those guys are going to be competing for defensive end roles. Basically 4, 5, 6 technique kind of guys.
Yes.
Soliai is starting. Babineau is starting. Tyson Jackson is starting. I feel like in 3-man sets, that's how it's going to work.
Yep.
In 4-man sets, I think you go Babineau and Peters inside. You go Goodman and then Massaquoi outside.
Okay.
And if you do a base 4-3 set. With Bierman as a strong side linebacker, Warlow in the middle, Bartu on the weak side. I feel like that's the best alignment there for the 4-3 defense. In pass rush situations, though, it wouldn't shock me to see Jackson, Babineau, even Goodman playing inside roles at defensive end or defensive tackle, or even having 2-3 techniques with 4 linebackers in a nickel. Wouldn't shock me either. And a lot of different blitz schemes. But Rashid Hageman would be in that same kind of Babineau, Jackson grouping. And even in the pass rush grouping, if you've got 4 guys up on the line who are going to be pass rushers, and you've got Hageman, Babineau, Massaquoi, and Osi, and that's your pass rush group, that's a pretty, for Atlanta this year, would be a lot stouter than what it was last year as a pass rush grouping. Because at least Goodman can hold on to a double team, and you're not having Babineau outside as an outside pass rusher, because that's not his game.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting how the Falcons kind of deploy their defensive line. I think you broke it down pretty much, kind of who's the 3-man front, who's the 4-man front. I'm particularly looking more at Goodman and Hageman, particularly because they're the young guys that really have the sort of future development potential that we're looking for. Soliai's towards the end of his career. Babineau's towards the end of his career. Peters is coming off that Achilles injury, and it's going to, whether or not he's on a 1-year deal, whether or not he gets a long-term deal from the Falcons next year, it's going to depend on how he plays, and then it's going to, there's a whole lot of factors go into that. But right now, I think it's pretty much a coin toss whether or not Peters is with the team next year. Jackson and Soliai both are older veterans, but they're kind of contracts are pretty much structured where after 2 years the Falcons might or probably will wind up cutting at least one of them. It's just like I think Soliai's counting like $6 million against like the 2016 cap, and that's a lot of money to be playing for a 2-down nose tackle. He's got to be.
He looks great.
Yeah. But I'm really looking at Goodman and Hageman, and you talked about how Hageman played all across the line, and when we drafted him, you heard 5 technique from the team. That's what they were saying he's going to be. But you do have the potential that he can play all over the place, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not they kind of throw everything at him. This team is all about cross-training guys, and is he going to play with this technique and that technique, inside, outside, all that type of stuff? And it kind of, I don't know. You can make the argument it kind of waters down his rookie season as opposed to saying you're just going to do one thing, play that 5 technique, play that 3 technique, whatever it is, and just focus on that. I'm curious to see how that goes in training camp. And Goodman's kind of the same way.
I feel like they kind of lied. They intentionally lied to us about that kind of stuff. Like, oh, this guy's a 5 technique. They just kind of go, well, that's what he is right now, and that's all we want you to focus on. But let's be honest here. We're talking about Mike Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about a guy who he'll throw a guy in 5 technique one play, 1 technique in the next play, 3 technique in the next play. Mm-hmm. He's done it with Babineau. He's done it with Peters. He's even done it with Jerry. Now, I think the best thing I can say right now is Jerry is fighting for a roster spot instead of fighting for a starting spot.
Yeah.
Soliai and Jackson, guaranteed starters. Babineau, I'd say he's a guaranteed starter unless Peters can show that he's 100% healthy during training camp. I think Peters could be a dark horse to take that spot. I also think Hageman could be a dark horse to take that outside spot as well. And I know you're a huge Babineau fan, but I think they'd much rather have Babineau as a DPR, designated pass rusher, for the nickel packages than as the pure, every down defensive end in the 3-4. I'm not saying anything bad about Babineau in that role. I'm just saying he's a much better pass rusher than he is a run stuffer.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You look at Babineau, I think he played the 4th most snaps of any interior defensive tackle last year. It was 50.
Play him 50% of the snaps instead of 70% of the snaps.
He played way too much last year. So anything, in my opinion, that cuts down on his snap count, whatever it is, because we know Babineau, if you want him to stop the run, he'll penetrate and stop the run. If you want him to pass rush, he'll penetrate and flush quarterbacks out the middle. So it's whatever you want him to do, he can do. That's the beauty of Babineau. And so if you want him to be a designated pass rusher, fine. If you want him to be a base defensive end, and when you go 3-man and stop the run, fine, that's fine. And whatever you want Babineau to do, I'm with it. Just don't play him as much as they played last year.
Yeah, I mean, give him 55, 60% of the snaps. I'm just saying don't play him in the base defenses because I don't feel like that's his best fit anyway.
Mm.
I feel like his best fit is playing 3 technique more than anything else.
That's
So
fair.
play him in the nickel packages at 3 technique most of the time. Play him next to Hageman and Peters and have Hageman come in and try and learn the base. Have Goodman play the base. I think Goodman's a better base end. He might even be the dark horse for the starting base end.
That's fair.
Having Goodman, Jackson, and Soliai out there might be the best setup, which isn't saying anything bad about anybody. It's saying Goodman's a better run defender than Babineau is, and Babineau's a great run defender, but Goodman's just better at it.
Mm-hmm.
Jackson is a terrific run defender. Soliai is a monster run defender. If all 3 of those guys are eating a double team, you've got 4 linebackers who can roam and have some fun out there. Because Bierman and Massaquoi are going to help shut that edge down. Because they're both good run defenders. Atlanta is trying to stop the run to force the pass.
Yeah.
Which is what any good defense should try and do.
Yeah, as you know, and run defense is probably a little bit more important. You can make the argument in the NFC than it is maybe in the AFC, simply because you have teams like Seattle and San Francisco that are at the top of the conference.
In Carolina?
You have teams like Green Bay who are, starting to run the ball a little bit more with Eddie Lacy. Supposedly the reason why the Saints got rid of Sproles is because they want to be more of a physical downhill running team. We'll see if that works out, but as long as they run Pierre Thomas against the Falcons defense, that's a guaranteed 100 yards or whatever per game, since he seems to kill us every game. But it's that run defense upgrade is going to be important, to help stop some of these teams. If we get into a situation like last year where it's like 3rd and 8, and we're giving, or what was it, 3rd and 16 against the Patriots, and we're giving up first downs on that play, it's not going to matter much. But it doesn't matter what you do. If you can't stop a 3rd and 16, then you're pretty much screwed. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how big an upgrade, because one of the underrated aspects of the Falcons under Van Gorder was they were very disciplined run defense. They weren't always the best statistically, but they were pretty stingy. And so if they can get back to that level, that'll be a positive boost for the defense. That definitely has no room to go but up. Scott, I want to ask you some of these bubble guys. Okay, we talked a little bit about who we're looking at. What about Travian Robinson? What about Perret? Are they making this team? What do you think about these undrafted rookies like Dante Ruff and Nosa Igwe? Are they practice squad guys, or do they have a legit shot at making the roster?
I hate to say it, but I think out of anybody, Dante Rumpf might make the roster, but I don't see it. Travian Robertson, as much as I want to be yeah, he's going to make the roster, I'm not seeing where he fits. Okay. He comes off more as a BVG defender than a Mike Nolan defender. Even though Nolan was the one who drafted him, I don't see a fit for him in the 3-4. Dante Rumpf, I really don't see a fit for him on the roster because I don't see him as that good of a player. He just seems like a body to practice at nose tackle. I think the only way Perret makes the roster is if Corey Peters is on the PUP list. Then Jerry has a spot. The dark horse here I could see make a roster is Cliff Matthews, but that's if they want to release both Peters and Jerry. Or if they feel Jerry sucks, so they just want to have Matthews on the roster instead of Jerry, and then have Peters come in when the PUP ends. That's the other thought. Nosa Igwe, great guy. I don't see him as anything more than a practice squad body, at most.
Okay. I think that's interesting with Cliff Matthews. He has been a regular contributor on special teams the last 2 years. So that does give him a little bit of a edge if it came down to like him versus Jerry. I think based off of last year, I would say Jerry's the better player. But Cliff Matthews is a high motor guy who'll play special teams. And if you're getting down to the nitty gritty of the roster, as I explained earlier, pretty much the last 10 or 15 guys that make the team are pretty much only going to play special teams unless someone gets hurt. And so if Matthews is potentially in a position to make one of those spots, then sure. But yeah, he probably needs Jerry to have a terrible camp, and he probably needs Peters to be, on the pup list, and not just for training camp, but for the regular season. So I would agree with all of your assessments on those.
Yeah, if there is a dark horse to make the roster, though, it would be Dante Rumpf, and it'd be because he somehow changed into this great base-eating nose tackle that he wasn't in college. I don't see him making the roster. I like Dante Rumpf, on a personal level. I just don't think he's an NFL caliber player. I just see a camp body. But anyway, it looks like we've already answered the Falcons mailbag question that we got this week, because it was, who do you think will be signed to fill the last 3 open spots? In a word, camp bodies.
That was Devontae Hughes who asked that question on Twitter to us.
He used to be known as a box of cookies, which was one of my favorite Twitter names for a while there.
But yeah, people get those mailbag questions to us. We, sit around all day waiting for these mailbag questions so we can answer them on air. But I guess no one cares about Falcons training camp and OTAs anymore because it's over, and World Cup is going on. So I guess we should have asked, do people have any World Cup mailbag questions or something like that? Maybe that would.
Let's do a 15-minute recap of how this horrible Cristiano Ronaldo guy scored was an assist to the final goal. Yeah, I watch a little bit of soccer. I don't really understand too much of it, other than when they kick the ball in the net, you get a point. And I feel like that's all I really need to know, because the rest of it just looks like a bunch of guys kicking the ball around. It looks like hockey on grass to me. Same kind of like defense. Like, hey, let's just play keep away and let's ice the ball, or let's kick the ball down the field so no one else can get it. As defense, that's the best defense. Just kick it all the way and make them run back and forth. Just kick it as far as you can.
Well, the beauty of soccer is that it is pretty much that simple. It's like the most simplistic sport. Just like, don't touch the ball with your hands, kick it, and don't go offsides. If you figure out what offsides is, then you pretty much figure out the most complex thing about soccer, as opposed to American football, which is like has a billion different rules. Like, you can grab the guy here, but you can't grab him here. Then this is holding, and this is a perfect block. It's weird. It's like 2 inches change. That's
Here's what I don't understand. Why didn't the goalie lay out the guy who scored that goal? Like, why didn't he just, like, wide receiver going over the middle, into the end zone? Why didn't he just, boom? Like, I understand you'd get a red card, you'd be kicked out of the game, but there's 28 seconds left.
Yeah.
That's when you get the red card. That's when you say, screw it, I don't need to be in this game. Like, let's win.
Yeah.
Oh, no, you just broke this guy's rib. Should have been wearing pads.
Yeah. I've been watching some of these World Cup games thinking, just hit that guy, just lay him out. And then I'm like, oh, wait, I'm too much of an American football fan as opposed to the world's football fan. Just blend the two sports together and just lay that dude out.
Well, I was watching the game with a soccer fan, and he was like, dude, I don't understand why he didn't just lay him out there either. Like, I was like, what? He goes, if he gets the red card, he's gone the next game. So he gets a free game off, and the U.S. already clinched their spot.
Yeah.
He's like, I would have laid him out right there. He's like, what's the worst that can happen? They get another kickback at the goal. He's like, he goes, and then you just get one of your guys to kick it as far down the field as possible to stall, He goes, it takes another 20 seconds to pull it upfield. By then, the game's over.
Yeah.
I was just like, why didn't they do that? It didn't make sense. But no. You got to let Cristiano Ronaldo make a kick like that. Nah, dude, I would have speared him. I would have looked like Goldberg out there.
Okay. That would have been
Although I probably would have done it in like the first minute. Just been like, yeah. Broke his rib. He would have been like, I can't play today. Then you don't have to worry about it at all.
Yeah. Got to play 10 on
That's dirty. Again, football mentality, not football mentality.
Yeah. But yeah. So, Scott, we got like basically like a month till training camp. We're going to be breaking down positional groups each week. Next week is what, edge rushers?
Edge rushers and interior off-ball linebackers is basically the thought.
Okay. Yeah, and then we'll get to the secondary, and then I guess we'll do long snappers, the week training camp starts or whatever. But
Kicker and punter. We can talk about how awesome Matt Bosher and Matt Bryant are. I'm sure Matt Bryant would love to hear his praises sung.
Let's get really into Josh Harris and break down his snapping ability and how he can aim the snap like 6 inches to the left or 6 inches to the right.
Asking me to break down a long snapper, a kicker, or a punter is like asking me to break down soccer.
Okay, that's fair. All right.
I know about the same amount of both. I know if the snap doesn't hit the ground, it's a good snap. If it's quick, it's a good snap. And if the holder doesn't drop it ever, it's a good snap. I know if the ball that the kicker kicks is straight, it's a good kick. But if it's to the right or the left, I couldn't tell you why that happens.
Pretty much.
I'd have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm not a kicker. Never have been, never will be, will never understand it. I've tried to learn. It's like calculus. I just don't get it.
We'll get Morton Anderson on here to explain it to you.
That would be probably the best idea, because he could probably say exactly what we need to look for, and I still would just have no idea.
Is it because he's Danish and you can't understand his accent?
Oh no, I'm saying it's kicking. I wouldn't understand it. It'd be like he was speaking in Danish. I wouldn't understand.
Well, you got anything else you want to talk about? Since we don't really, as people can probably tell, we're just kind of stalling towards the end to try to get a full hour in here. But
yeah, we can talk about Joe Hawley.
You want to talk about Joe Hawley? Okay, let's do this.
All right, so I got this tweet from this guy who said with Joe Hawley the team goes 8-8. With James Stone starting, they go 13-3. And the first thing I physically did was this. Because I've had, and you might even be able to see an imprint on my forehead. Because I've had the same argument with this guy multiple times.
Yeah, I know.
Did Joe Hawley steal his girlfriend or something? Like, I hate to break it to those James Stone fans out there. The reason why the guy went undrafted is because he's not a good pro prospect. He's not quick off the snap. He's not very strong. He's not very good at calling out protections. The reason why he did well at Tennessee is because it was a mainly run-blocking offense. And he had 4 linemen around him who were pretty good in Zach Fulton and James, who's now playing for Miami, and Tiny Richardson, and Dallas Thomas for 3 of the 4 years. When you got 4 guys who were on pro camps and 3 of the 4 got drafted, and the only reason why the 4th one didn't get drafted is because he's got an arthritic degenerative knee condition, you're probably going to look pretty good. And using that same concept, Joe Hawley has had Garrett Reynolds, Peter Kahns, and Harlan Gunn to the right of him. No offense to any of those 3, but none of them are starting right guard caliber in the NFL today, especially not as run blockers.
Mm-hmm.
They're all great reserves right now. Cons might eventually turn into a good left guard. I just don't see him as a starting right guard. And yes, it's a completely different position because left guard's more finesse and right guard's more power. But give him John Asamoah right there.
Mm-hmm.
Give him Jake Matthews at right tackle instead of the Jeremy Trueblood and Ryan Schrader combination he had. Again, nothing against Ryan Schrader, but he probably shouldn't be starting at this point in his career. He's probably about another year away from starting.
That's
to be
fair.
nice to them.
Yeah.
The one game that the line was Sam Baker and Lamar Holmes and Cons and Hawley and all, like, it was like the line that looked like it made sense was the first Carolina game.
Mm-hmm.
That was the only day they looked competent. They allowed one sack all day. And it was in garbage time. They allowed one hit all day. And it was right at the end of the first half. It made sense.
Mm-hmm.
That was the line they wanted to use from a get-go.
Yep. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Hawley's a good player. He's not Alex Mack. He's not Nick Mangold. But he's a solid center. He's got similar. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. He's got similar attributes to Todd McClure. We'll see if he's going to last 14 years, but like Todd McClure did. But he's a good player, and the idea that James Stone is better than him or the Falcons, he's the reason why. You can blame him for losing that week 17 finale against the Panthers, I guess, because of the bad snap. But it wasn't like he gave up 5 sacks in that game, like pretty much everybody else on the roster did that year.
He gave up 1 hit and 1 pressure in that game.
Yeah, so it was like a group effort of terribleness for the Falcons offensive line that day. But the idea that somehow like the Falcons' struggles last year were because of Joe Hawley is ridiculous.
He only had 2 bad games last year too, as a starter, and one of them was against Marcel Darius. Fair enough.
That tends to happen.
Top 5 defensive tackle in the league. The other was against Star Latulele, who is quickly becoming a top 5 tackle in the league.
Yeah.
I mean, tough matchups, especially when you don't have a competent right guard right next to you. Give him John Asamoah there. He'll look so much better.
Mm-hmm.
I just get tired of seeing the same just crap from the same guy about Hawley. It's like, dude, let it go. I don't know if he stole your girlfriend or what, but he's a legitimate starter in today's NFL. He deserves to start, especially over Peter Cons. And James Stone has done nothing, even in college, to show that he is a competent NFL center.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. If James Stone started at center tomorrow, or not tomorrow, when the season started, he'd put up Gino Gradkowski or Ryan Wendell type numbers in terms of sacks allowed and hits allowed and hurries allowed for a center.
Yeah. That's about right. I think you just named off the 2 worst centers in the league, didn't you?
2 of the 3.
Okay. Yeah, that's what
The third's Peter Cons.
Okay. All right. So okay, question in. Is James Stone or Peter Cons? Who's better? Who would be better?
Let's put it this way. I'd rather the Falcons signed a center than a guard so they could get the Cons moved to left guard a little bit quicker, done a little bit quicker. Maybe move Mike Johnson to center and then have Cons slide to left guard.
Don't forget my
That
guy.
kind of tells you everything you need to know, honestly.
Yeah. Well, is that our show? Did we basically break down why hating on Joe Hawley is crazy?
Yeah, basically.
All right. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Falcons. Scott is at Scott Karasik. Hit up the show at Falcons PFC. Please get those mailbag questions in. I know it's a dull time for football. It's the 4-week period where nothing happens except for 4 guys get arrested, and pretty much that's all that happens over the next month. But send in those questions, any Falcon questions that you have. We even try to terribly answer your World Cup questions, I guess. I don't know. But anyway,
I
that's our
think we
show.
need more spears in the World Cup.
Okay, yeah. More cut blocking.
No, just straight up spears, like Goldberg style spear. Like knock him the hell out kind of spear. Take the red card, break the rib. You know, don't let Cristiano Ronaldo rain on the Americans parade ever again.
Okay.
Yeah. They're coming for you, Ronaldo. But yeah, that's our show. I'm confused as to what's going on.
This is this game now. Let's see how long we can sit here quietly and pretend like this is supposed to happen. Oh.
It kind of does feel